Okay, if you could start the live streaming, please. Okay, welcome everyone to the Development Management Licensing Committee. With no further ado, I will go around the table and ask people to identify themselves, starting with Councillor Moody.
Jeff Moody, Tavistock North Ward.
Hello, I'm Neil Jory. I'm the councillor for Tamar Ford Ward.
Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Alistair Cunningham, Buckler Monacorum Ward.
Steve Guthrie, Drew Stainton Ward.
Caroline Mott, Bridistow.
Sam Wakeham, Hatherley Ward.
Bryony Hanlon, Senior Planning Officer.
Jacqueline Houselander, Head of Development Management for West Devon.
Catherine Bowen, Legal Advisor to the Development Management Committee for West Devon.
Rich Edel, I represent Buckler Monacorum Ward and chair the planning meeting.
Terry Southcott, Bridistow Ward and Vice Chair of this meeting.
Catherine Hall, Democratic Services at West Devon.
Thank you very much, and apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, Chair, thank you.
Just for the committee, one point of clarification. Councillor Mann, who was a member of this committee, having resigned from the council, we aren't permitted to appoint a substitute because she resigned with immediate effect. So we're down to 9, and another member of this committee will be proposed at the next full council meeting. Which moves me on to item 3, which is the declaration of interests. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Mott.
In respect to the application that we've got coming before us, I, like the rest of the committee, I suspect, have been emailed by one of the objectors to the application, and that has been forwarded to the Head of Planning and the Planning Officer.
Noted. Thank you. Item 4, items requiring urgent attention. None have been brought to my notice, and so we move on to item 5, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February. Are members of the committee happy to accept those minutes? Thank you. And we now have a statement from the legal officer.
Get my right glasses on, Chairman. Yes, just a brief reminder for the benefit of the public who might not be familiar with the planning application system and how they're determined and the legal framework that lies behind that. So the committee needs to consider the following points. Regard must be had to the development plan policy and other material planning considerations. Material planning considerations are those about development or use of land. Decisions are to be taken in accordance with the development plan unless other material considerations suggest otherwise. The committee needs to establish whether a development proposal complies with the development plan read as a whole. And where policies conflict, the committee has to undertake a balancing exercise involving the use of its planning judgment, and finally, development plan policies must be read sensibly, with words having their ordinary and natural meaning.
Thank you very much. We now move on to planning applications. We just have one in front of us today. That is 138424 OPA. Land at SS 545045 Park Road, Hatherley. Outline planning application for proposed erection of 2 dwellings with all matters reserved except for access. I'll hand over now to the planning officer for her brief.
Okay, so just at the start, we'd like to make a minor correction to the report that you've been sent. So condition 1 refers to the plans. We'd like to correct those to read location plan March 24 Rev A and block plan Rev B, and I'll show you those plans in the presentation. So the application, as stated, is an outline planning application for 2 dwellings with access and all other matters reserved. So this just shows you the red line outline of the application. And so the green diamond shows the position of the site relative to Hatherley. And this just shows Park Road. So this is the site location plan. So you'll see, compared to the previous meeting, all reference to the siting of dwellings has been taken off this plan. So you're just considering the red line outline and the access for the proposed siting of 2 dwellings. This is the revised block plan. This just shows the contours of the land, and again with the access relative to the neighbouring dwellings. And these are the site photos. So this is the existing entrance from Park Road. There's a field gate there, looking up into the site. This is the land at the very top of the site, sort of beyond the red line. And just looking back down again. This is standing at the bottom of the site next to the hedge. And this is in Park Road itself. So just to give you a very brief history of the planning history of the site, outline permission was granted under 1635-18 OPA, but that has now lapsed. There is an extant consent for works to the access, and that's extant under 2216/22/FUL. So the joint local plan was adopted on the 26th of March 2019. Since that time, the National Planning Policy Framework's been updated. We no longer have a 5-year housing land supply. So our supplementary planning document sets out how sites adjacent to higher tier settlements will be considered. The site's within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's got pedestrian access into Hatherley, and all technical matters will be controlled at reserved matters stage. And on this basis, we have recommended conditional approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we got questions from the committee to the planning officer? No? Thank you very much. We now have move on to our registered speakers. We have 3 registered speakers this morning, and the first is Mr. Kevin Watts. I'd like to come up. Good morning. The way this works is you'll be given 3 minutes to say what you wish to the committee. The committee will then have an opportunity to ask questions. And so when you're ready, within whatever you're going to say, yes. Yeah. Press the button when you're ready to go.
Sorry, it's to do with, I received an email from Bryony on the 6th of March telling me that this application is now dealing with the access to the site. Prior to that, access wasn't part of the planning application, and Bryony said that this was just a minor alteration that didn't need re-advertising. I want to stress I want this to go ahead today, but if I could just say, as a member of the public who I haven't got all the backup that you guys have got, I haven't got a planning agent because every time I try and get one, the meetings are adjourned. But it's very difficult for a Joe public like me to understand what is actually being decided by this application.
Okay, let me come in there. Do you wish to say anything about the email on access?
Yes, so members, for your information, since the application was deferred from the last meeting, as you might recall, the layout had been ticked on the application form and it had not been properly assessed, so we deferred consideration of the application in order to make sure we had fully considered the layout. Subsequent to that, having had discussions with the applicant, we made the decision to actually remove the details of the layout, because in fact they led to lots of issues as to what the development would actually look like, and this is actually an outline application. So in essence, an outline application proposes the principle of the development. The access has always been included within the application since this application was submitted, and as the planning officer said, the access actually currently has permission separately to this application, but what the applicant has decided to do is put the access again into this application so that it can be approved alongside the principle of the development.
Okay, just before we go on, members of the committee, are you clear now what is in front of us? So we're looking at an application which looks at the principle of development on this site, not any details of what that development might be, and the access, which has already been approved, is included in this application simply to bring the whole thing into one document.
I understand this now. It's a reapplication for access and outline for the buildings. The problem is that when you read the applicant's documents that are submitted, they say that permission is already granted for application, so it's not up for discussion. So in Joe Public's mind, that's very difficult to understand, that I'm being told in one breath it's an application for access and the outline approval for dwellings, but in the next breath, you've got a document submitted by the applicant that's saying, sorry, you don't want me to speak, obviously.
No, I think we're clear as a committee that the details of the access are not changed. They're as approved.
Can I just clarify? This application is in outline. It is to establish the principle of development on this site of 2 dwellings. I wrote a long letter to Mr. Watts last week explaining that to him in detail. So members are just being asked to consider whether the principle of the development on this site is acceptable, and the only detailed element of the application is access, which has already got its own separate permission. So it's not anything other than that members are being asked to consider. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all clear. Off you go.
If any weight is being given to this application because the original outline application was supported, then it needs to be noted that not one single thing, apart from the fields grid reference, is the same as that original application. The existing field entrance was being used, only 5 metres of ancient hedgerow were being impacted, 2 low-profile bungalows set well down the hillside were being proposed. Badgers were nowhere within a kilometre of the site. The dominant view of the site post-development would be the agricultural field behind the bungalows. The most important view of the site was from the historic Jubilee footpath diagonally opposite. Now, Hatherley Market development has taken place and 100 plus new homes have been built. Like I said, nothing is the same. There can be no argument that for Hatherley, the Jubilee footpath is a non-designated historic asset. Established in 1897 to commemorate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, the land was given by a local farmer whose descendants still live in Hatherley. The first planning officer stated that the views from it were protected, so what's changed now? In West Devon planning policies, utmost care must be given to applications that impact the environment of such sites. Badgers have finally been acknowledged here and they're supposed to have protection. Hedgehogs, adders, grass snakes and slow worms are all present in the area and use the hedgerow. The hedgerow is believed to date back to medieval ages according to Devon County Council maps and protected in law. This officer's report says that minimum heights of the hedgerow are to be maintained because of its positive contribution to the street scene and its screening effect. Yet so much is being impacted. How will this be possible? The report also says that the development is possible on this site because it is not considered to be rural in character. Clearly, that's not correct. The entire right-hand side of the field has been sold, and its owners have shown us their plans to fence off all their land, nullifying the agricultural value of any land behind them. The officer's report says it's sustainable because it benefits from pedestrian access to Hatherley, yet there is no pavement along 95% of the single-track Park Road. Cars regularly have to mount the curb on what little pavement is there due to poor parking. The new 30-mile-an-hour speed limit area is nearly always ignored. Currently, there is no permission for development on this site. You have seen what's happened with this applicant before. Please don't support this application.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, have you got any questions for Mr. Watts? Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. You mentioned the Jubilee footpath. I wasn't able to go on the site visit, but would it be possible to explain on this diagram where this sits in relation to the footpath and how it impacts the views? Thank you. And a second point, if I may, you mentioned that, as I understood it, because the site was going to be fenced off, that some agricultural land, I guess to the rear of that, was going to be, I think your word was nullified. Could you explain that a little further?
Apologise. All through the application process, it's always been the case that the development area is the area in red. The remainder of the field behind the houses is going to be retained as agricultural land. It's you can't see it on. Yeah, you can see it. Can I show you again on the map? Basically, Mr. Flowers owns the area in blue, but the right-hand side of the field, and this blue line is showing the border of it, has been sold to other applicants, they have submitted applications themselves on the site to try to get the decision to say that the previous permission had lapsed reversed, but they have given us neighbouring properties trying to get us on board with their application, drawings that show that their intention is to fence off the entire land under their ownership, and in that case there wouldn't be the agricultural value. They're going to use that as an extension to their garden, if you like. They own the land, they already own it, and their intention is to fence off and put a hedge all the way up the length of the field, which obviously would have no access for agricultural use.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Watts from the committee? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Watts. Our next registered speaker is Mr. Pearce. No need to remind you what the routine is. You've got 3 minutes. Go when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a few little bits to sort of try and unpack from what's just been said. as was rightly pointed out, the access has always been a consideration in this outline application, which is for the principal. The application hasn't changed from that outline which was previously approved, only insofar as this one shows access. The other one was outlined in principle, so there's no details that have changed specifically. And the site benefits from an approved new access, which expires in October this year, unless it's implemented. So those are the facts in terms of there's an approved access, and the outline hasn't changed from what was previously approved. I don't have much to say insofar as the application is recommended for approval. We wholeheartedly support that approval. I don't need to remind members of the lack of a 5-year land supply and the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development. It's set out clearly in the report that this site is considered to be sustainable. The previous approval was under the current local plan policies, so there's no change, material change in that respect. So I would, I mean, finally, I mean, the other point about the future plans of the neighbours is not relevant to the members' consideration. It's not before you. The application that is before you is for an outline application with access, and it's supported by your officers, and I would wholeheartedly support that recommendation and urge members to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the committee, have you got any questions for Mr. Pearce? No? Thank you very much. Next registered speaker is Councillor Wakeham, who is the ward member. You've got 5 minutes if you need 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for your report. I'd like to start with some insight into the congestion in Park Road. A couple of weeks ago, I drove down and firstly had to use the driveway of Pathfield to allow a car to pass. And then at the other end of the road was the recycling lorry. A car mounted the pavement to pass, and I had to reverse 100 yards or so to let that car into their property. I consider that this is not a good place for more houses and inevitably more cars. This is a single lane road with very narrow pavements where there are any. The main issue here, though, is the harmful impact of character and appearance of the area. A JLP policy which carries enormous weight and seems to be the bedrock of the whole plan, along with maintaining the street scene. The view from the historic Jubilee Path will be compromised. Views and settings are protected. Any building on the site of this application will be incongruous, as we expect to see here an agricultural field bound by an ancient hedge which has, for as long as local residents can remember, been grazed by sheep. This is most certainly a rural setting. It also has to be taken into account that there are 2 badger sets in the field which, as we all know, have protected status. The ancient hedge will be endangered by its translocation. This is no guarantee that it will survive. The importance of the hedge being a screen has been mentioned in the report, which is why it should stay in situ. In its current place, it also acts as a flood deterrent. If moved and buildings are constructed, the street scene will be completely altered. We have to recognise that houses need to be built, but not where they will ruin the character of this historic market town. Hatherley is lucky to have fields within the settlement, giving a quintessential pastoral setting. Large towns and cities are busy incorporating green spaces into their developments. We should not be disadvantaging the residents of Hatherley with intensification. This action reduces the environmental quality of the area, adding to noise, light and air pollution. To sum up, there will be harm to the character and appearance of the area. It will alter the street scene. It will be building on an agricultural field and compromising agricultural operations. It will be endangering an ancient hedge. It will endanger badgers, it will reduce the environmental quality, and it will add to the congestion of this very narrow road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, have you any questions for Councillor Wakeham? Okay, well, we've had the registered speakers and the ward member, and we've had an opportunity to ask questions of them. We're now in discussion, although I have just one question of clarification. Going back to the access permission that was granted in 22, were this to be approved today, does that reset the date of that, of when that expires to the date of this application? Or do they remain two sort of separate applications with different dates?
They would remain two separate applications with different dates.
Okay. Okay. Any other matters of discussion? Councillor Mott.
If I may, Chair, please, because much has been made about the damage to the hedgerow, could the officer, please, my apologies, because I appreciate you're the only one left sat at the table for this question, and perhaps I should have directed it at the agent. So I'm happy to do so if you would rather I did that. Can we have clarity, please, on the planting scheme and what is going to be done to rectify the removal of the hedgerow, please?
So all the conditions are as set out in the officer report. If you want some comparison, I have got the plan for the previous application, just to give you an idea. But at this stage, everything is contained within the report in terms of conditions. So we'd need all of that detail before anything kind of went further.
Thank you.
Any other points before we move to a vote? Well, I make the recommendation, move the recommendation of conditional approval. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
All those in favour of the officer's recommendation for conditional approval, please show. Okay. Hands up, please, for those who are prepared to support the officer's recommendation for conditional approval.
That's 6, Chair.
Those against? Any abstentions?
That's 1.
Okay, the recommendation is approved. Thank you very much. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, which is appeals update.
So, members, as opposed to last month where we had 11 appeals to be looking at, this time we only have 1. And that was a recent decision, which members may be familiar with, there we go. Yeah, so it was there were 2 applications on a site adjacent to Catsmere Cross at Bridgestow. One application was for the retention of an agricultural barn, which had previously been erected on the site. And the other one was for the provision of a temporary mobile home for a rural worker. The recommendation, obviously, by the officers was refusal, and there was a hearing to discuss the case. And the reasons for refusal were for the building with the impact on the rural landscape, because it was in a very prominent position. And I've just realised I haven't added the reasons for that number 2, but that was the consideration was that there was no essential agricultural need for there to be a mobile home stroke temporary accommodation on the site. Again, that was also retrospective. The mobile home was on the site and was being lived in by the applicants. This is the location of the development. Catsmore Cross is just here, and there's an access off this road into the site, and that's the red line supported, and you can see it here on a Google image. See the building actually on the Google image. This is a photograph of the site. This is the barn that was erected, and the application was retrospective. Then this was the caravan, which has since had a lean-to added to it, which doesn't have permission currently. This is the barn as taken by the officer when they were considering the application. These are the elevations of the barn. So the inspector at the appeal considered there were 3 main issues. One with regard to the appeal A, which was for the barn, whether there was a proven agricultural need for the barn. The second one was whether there was an essential need for a rural worker to live at the premises, and whether the business is planned on a sound financial basis. And then thirdly, for both appeals, the issue was the effect of the character and appearance of the area. The inspector concluded that because of the type of farming proposed, so they were proposing cattle, pigs, sheep, chickens, and they felt that there was a need for the livestock to have some form of accommodation, if you like, in the barn. So the inspector felt that they had demonstrated, because of the nature of the farming, that was required. And on the appeal B, which was for the mobile home, the inspector also felt that the operational requirements of the business and its ability to expand would need 2 full-time workers. We had employed an agricultural specialist to advise on his view of that, and he did not feel that was the case. I think he felt that it was probably just part-time work. But the inspector didn't agree with that. But she did raise concerns about the potential of the business to be able to expand, because some of the land owned by not even owned, rented by the applicant, was in Lidford, which was quite some distance away from this site. So she questioned that and therefore gave a temporary permission for the mobile home on the basis that they would then have to then provide robust evidence if they wanted to continue to use the caravan into the future and then potentially ask for a permanent dwelling. But they would have to prove that to be in accordance with our planning policies. It was an interesting one. I think we approached the hearing thinking that the inspector would agree with us, but the inspector didn't. And so he allowed both appeals. The difficulty we now have, though, is that neither of the buildings are in the place where the plans indicate they should be. So potentially we're now in an enforcement situation where we have to ask them to move the buildings, or they would have to apply again. So it's a really messy situation that we've ended up with, which we're going to have to find our way through. Our enforcement officer and the planning officers are communicating regularly to, and I think they've already been out to the site. They've written to the agent and said, at the moment, effectively, they're occupying a caravan not in the location where it should be. So there's a suggestion that potentially they might have to move out of the caravan in order to move it to the place where it should be, or they could apply again. And on the basis of the appeal, it would probably be something we would give a temporary permission for. But yeah, so it's very interesting, and we've ended up in quite an interesting situation.
Well, it is a mobile home, so presumably moving it.
Which has had a permanent building.
I've got one question on that. I'll come to you in a minute. Could you just go back to the photograph you had up a minute ago, if that's possible? On back from that. Sorry, shown. Is there? Sorry, no, the one that was there that showed the mobile home. Does the question of habitability come into the decision-making process? I mean, I've no idea what the inside of that mobile home is like, but if it were not deemed to be fit for habitation, would that come into the decision-making process?
It's more about the principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
no matter what sort of mobile home
well,
it is,
I guess if it was really terrible,
yeah.
But I think it's about the principle of having some form of accommodation on site.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other, Councillor Moody?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know the temporary approval for how long is that?
It's for 3 years.
Okay. Guthrie.
It doesn't really add anything to the debate other than I think it's highly unusual that got through, and to have 2 full-time workers on a 12-acre site, speculatively, is nonsense.
Inspectors inspect the way that inspectors inspect.
Another thing came to mind. You said that the inspector went against the expert's view. When the inspector declines that view or opposes that view, do they give the reason why they're not going with the professional? Or do they just say that they don't agree?
I think there is a paragraph within the appeal statement from the inspectorate which talks about the information that was submitted by the appellant, and that's where there was a little bit of concern about the longevity of the enterprise, if you like, which is why she gave a temporary permission as opposed to a permanent one.
That's it for appeals, unless anyone else has got any questions on the... So we now move on to undetermined majors, item 9 on the agenda. And they've been updated, and I think we just take them as individuals want to discuss them. So has anyone got anything they particularly want to say about any of the undetermined majors?
Yeah, I've got a bit of an update since the... So with regard to the Wool Grading Centre, our favourite, that the Environment Agency have recently confirmed that they still maintain an objection, and so there's been a number of opportunities for the applicant to be able to try to address that matter, and it hasn't been achieved. So it's likely that the application will now be written up with that as a reason for refusal. The next one, Laundry and Guns, that is waiting for Section 106, but the information that we've asked for some information from the applicant to confirm the discharge of ownership matters, and that, again, that's imminent. Green Hill, Lamberton, again, that's had a draft Section 106 is out for consideration and being dealt with and likely to be completed very soon. The Beer Alston application, again, waiting for Section 106, but there's been some concern by the applicant's solicitors about the public art contribution that has been requested, and they seem to think they don't have to provide that, but it was part of the committee resolution, so we will be insisting that they do that, and if they don't, then it would need to come back to committee for you to consider. The next one down, which is the development at Northloo, that's recently, I think yesterday, in fact, been sent to the ward members with a recommendation for approval. So the ward members have that currently. Jethro's, again, had delegated authority to conditionally approve. There's an issue with regard to the BNG contribution for the site, and in an ideal world, it would be, we would like to put that within the Section 106 agreement, but there is actually a condition on the outline saying that BNG should be provided. So there's a little bit of legal debate about that one currently. Baldwin Drive, we're waiting for quotes from some viability consultants so that we can assess the viability assessment that's been submitted by the applicant. And the development site at Lifton, there's been a number of technical objections to it, and so there's a need for us to either address those or to make a recommendation for refusal on that one. And the final one is non-material amendment to the wording of some conditions on an original approval, and this is up at east of Crediton Road, parcel 4B, and we're seeking legal advice on that change.
Well, it does look as though we're finally sort of crunching through some of these, and
yes,
it'd be nice to get them off the slop chip,
off the list.
particularly the wool mill, which is an old friend of ours. Right. I think that's it for the Development Management Committee. So I formally close the meeting. Thank you very much. But I now have a treat for you. The senior planner has gone to great expense to put on a film show for us.